Welcome to episode 28 of the Gluttons For Punishment Podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. He's Lepore, I'm Bruno. Thank you so much for listening and watching us on YouTube as well. If you're a new listener and you enjoy the show, we would really appreciate it if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And if you're watching on YouTube and you enjoy the content, it would be a big time help if you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. All right, everybody. As of July 8th, 2021, the Tampa Bay Lightning have repeated as Stanley Cup champions, defeating the Montreal Canadiens 4-1. It was a dominant performance from the Lightning, and we are going to get into the entire series. We're going to talk about the Lightning, the Habs. It is going to be a jam-packed episode, and I promise you do not want to miss this one. But before we get into all that, it is time to welcome in my partner in crime, Mr. Michael Lepore. How you doing, man?
How could I be better, Anthony? A team wearing blue and white won the Stanley Cup. And if you squint just hard enough, it looks like the Toronto Maple Leafs. But unfortunately, we're not that lucky. Once you put the glasses back on, it is in fact the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Back to pain and misery, Lepore.
Exactly. Episode 28. Shout out to Ty Domi, legendary tough guy, Ty Domi. One of those guys who, whenever you go to a game, you see lots of Ty Domi jerseys around the rink. Fan favorite. Lots to talk about today. The Stanley Cup was handed out. So let's get at it, brother.
All right, Lepore, let's get right into it. I mean, what can you say about this Lightning team? They are just unbelievable from top to bottom. The amount of talent on this roster at every position. John Cooper, one of the best coaches in the National Hockey League. They were just incredible. They outscored the Lightning 17-8 over 5 games.
Yeah.
I mean, the Habs had a little glimmer of hope winning that game 4 and avoiding elimination heading back to Amalie Arena, but you just knew that this Lightning team was going to come out for blood in game 5 in front of those home fans, and they didn't disappoint. They came out really strong in the first period, outshot the Habs 13-4. It was getting a little bit dicey there, and I think Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, for those of you who saw her comments heading into game 4, we're probably thinking that she was going to go into hiding, because if Tampa ended up losing game 5 and this went back to Montreal for game 6, oh man, things would have got real interesting. But the Lightning did their mayor a solid and won the Stanley Cup on home ice, just like she said that they were going to do. But Lepore, man, just give me your general take on this series and the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, on the series, as much as Habs fans aren't going to want to hear it, this series was not close, man. It really and truly was not close. In game 1, Montreal was held to 19 shots. In game 4, the Montreal somehow won. They were held to 21 shots. And the shots at one point were like 10-1 or 11-1. And in the clinching game last night, Montreal was held to 22 shots. Not a lot to say about this series with regard to competitiveness. Tampa's too deep, too skilled, too much of a machine. Chris Johnson was laughed at quite often this season for calling certain teams juggernauts. I think he'd be an idiot if he didn't refer to this Tampa Bay Lightning team as anything but a juggernaut. And you look back at different teams that have won the Stanley Cup, and multiple Stanley Cups for that matter, I feel like there's always one thing to point to. Like, this team had goaltending, this team had an amazing D, this team had scoring. Take your pick with this Tampa Bay team. Take your pick. They have, and before Habs fans throw shit at me, they have the best goalie in the league. They have probably the best D in the league, or among the best Ds in the league, and among the best forward groups, or if not the best forward group in the league. Take your pick. take your pick as to the reason why the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup. They're too much. And you can see it in games, like watching this series. And I don't blame Montreal. It's more like I'm not placing any blame on Montreal for this aspect of the matchup. It's more just straight compliments to Tampa. When you'd watch these games, Tampa would pin them. Montreal would try to get out of their zone. It'd come back the other way. Tampa would pin them. They'd lose the puck in the neutral zone, or maybe a quick rush, and then the puck would come back the other way. Like, I'd like to see the percentages for the series as to where the puck was percentage wise, like neutral zone, offensive zone, defensive zone for the Tampa Bay Lightning, because it just seemed like they always had the puck. Too good, man. Too good. It's going to be an interesting offseason for them because, I mean, they're going to have to unload some bodies and they are going to look different next year. So we'll see. But I'll ask you, Bruno, how do you see this 2021 Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning team?
This team is just so good. Like you said, Lepore, at every position, they're just loaded. And I talked about this on the previous podcast. You know, everyone likes to look at Tampa and they talk about their high-flying offense and Kucherov and Point and Stamkos. Well, speaking of Stamkos, the guy was basically a role player in this series. I think he finished the Stanley Cup Final. Where is it here? Steven Stamkos, captain of the Lightning, $8.5 million a year, finished the Stanley Cup Final with 1 point in 5 games.
Crazy.
I mean, if that doesn't speak to the depth across this roster, then I don't know what does. But what I was so impressed with is their decor. Because like I said, you think about the Lightning kind of in the same light as some of the other high-skilled teams in the league, like, you know, Colorado and the Leafs and teams like that, right? But this defense core, Victor Hedman is just an absolute monster. Ryan McDonough, Mikhail Sergachev. Like, are you kidding me? Those, I can't find a better top 3, like, D unit in the league. And there's some other teams that might have an issue with me saying that, but man, oh man, you talk about having a 3-headed monster on defense. Those guys are awesome. Then you add in dudes like Eric Chernak, who's a very quality, like number 4, number 5 defenseman. So I was just so impressed with their decor. And what I love about Victor Hedman, I mean, this guy's 6'6", skates like the wind, has all the skill in the world. In previous series, when Montreal would break the other way off a turnover and get an odd man rush or going on a breakaway, it just wasn't happening in this series. And a big reason for that was Victor Hedman, because when you thought that he'd be a step behind and that the Habs would have an opportunity for an odd man rush, he would just take a couple strides, use that reach, and just completely eliminate the play. So that was super impressive to watch. And another thing about this Lightning team, I spoke about the depth. Like, listen to this stat. They had 13 different players score in this series. 13 different players scored a goal in the Stanley Cup Final.
In the final?
For the Tampa Bay Lightning. In the final alone, Lepore, 13 different goal scorers.
That's got to be a record, or like among the best ever. That's banana. And in 5 games, wow, that's incredible.
Like, it's unbelievable. You just go down the list. Kucherov, Coleman, Tyler Johnson, Barclay Goodrow, Andre Palat, Chernak, Cirelli, Hedman, Jan Ruta, Ross Colton, Yanni Gord, Pat Maroon, Steven Stamkos. Those are all the guys that scored a goal in this series for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Crazy.
So, I mean, there's really nothing else to say about this team. Like, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. They're one of the best teams of the Cap era. Just a dominant performance. And, you know, I talked about this on a previous show as well. Like, heading into the playoffs, they kind of flew under the radar a little bit. You know, finished with the 8th best record in the NHL. Kucherov missed the whole season. Like, for this team to play at a 110-point pace, to finish with the 8th best record in the league without Nikita Kucherov the entire season, and for Steven Stamkos, who missed 16 games this season, or sorry, 18 games Steven Stamkos missed this year, and for them to just not miss a beat, and it didn't matter who was in and out of the lineup. Like, even think about Alex Killorn, who only played 1 game in the Cup Final.
Yep.
Before he went into the Cup Final with 17 points in 18 games in the playoffs.
Didn't even get brought up. It barely got brought up. So, he's not playing. Oh, he's going to skate, and he's not playing. Yep. Like, off we go.
You know, you think about other teams, and, you know, I hate to always bring up the Leafs, but like, okay, obviously Tavares is a better player than Killorn, right? But like, Tavares goes down, and all of a sudden it like changes the entire complexion of the series. And Killorn is not that caliber of player, but it's like, it almost like didn't matter. It's like if any of these Lightning players go down, you just had confidence that they were still going to find a way.
Well, you made the point with Stamkos. It's like he didn't produce, he had a bad series, and they still won easily.
It's
bananas.
It's wild to think about that. Steven Stamkos, a guy, a few seasons ago, Leaf fans were praying that he was going to sign with Toronto as a free agent.
I think that thank God for both sides on that one. Thank God for both sides.
For real.
Frig.
But I think it's safe to say now that Stamkos made the correct decision.
Do you think he did?
Do
you think he did? I think he sits back at night and regrets that decision. But speaking of the whole back-to-back thing, so Pierre LeBrun posted this last night. So the 62-win Lightning team in 18-19, that was the team that got swept by Columbus in the first round. In the last 2 years, Tampa Bay has obviously won 8 straight playoff series. They've never trailed in a playoff series, and they never lost back-to-back games.
That's just absurd.
It's banana. It's like I keep saying banana. It's like I'm trying to find other adjectives, but that's how good they are. To not in 2 seasons, in eight series. It's crazy.
To
not trail and to not lose back-to-back games. And we talk about a lot of advanced stats on this show and how luck plays a part in hockey. When you're that good, it doesn't matter. Give teams all the luck. We're so good, it doesn't matter. Our second best players will beat you. Our goalie will beat you. Our defensive depth will beat you. We'll out-scheme you. This is a historically good team, man. I think this is one of those things where we're going through it right now, and we're just kind of ho-hum. The Tampa Bay Lightning are really good, but we're going to look back, man. We're going to look back at this team in a while and be like, wait a sec, they had the best defenseman in the league and the best goalie in the league and one of the best forward groups in the league, former Hart Trophy winner Kucherov and 65 goal scorer Steven Stamkos. And who knows what Braden Point will end up being in his career and the label he'll have on his career. It's just incredible team, man. Historically good team. What's so nuts about it too is obviously Vasilevsky won the Conn Smythe and his numbers were crazy, so he fully deserved it. But you do look at this series and his cumulative goals saved above expected. It was pretty flat the whole series. So Montreal was held to 8 goals in 5 games, and you can't even point to, well, Vasilevsky played amazing. It's no, he was just compared to average goaltending in the National Hockey League, he was fine, and they still beat you. Whereas other teams who have a goalie, and we'll point to the Canadiens, if Carey Price is fine, Montreal loses. Period.
Exactly.
They have a Vezina trophy winning goalie, and he can play average, and they still win in 5 games, outscoring their opponent more than 2-1.
It's insane because you look at Vasilevsky's just raw save percentage numbers in this series. He had a .943 save percentage in the Stanley Cup Final, but kind of you're alluding to, Lepore, he didn't really have to stand on his head in any of these games. And maybe you look to game 2, the game where they were outshot 43-23, and maybe you think, okay, that was the hardest Vasilevsky had to work in this series. But just thinking about specific moments and big saves that he had to make. And listen, Vasilevsky obviously made some really big saves in this series, but there's nothing that really stands out in terms of oh my God, Vasilevsky, if it wasn't for him, there's no way the Lightning would have won this cup. Like you said, Lepore, he was just, normal Andre Vasilevsky. He was really good, but he didn't have to be spectacular by any means for this Lightning team to do what they just did.
Yeah. I remember if I remember correctly, there were a few games against the Islanders where he was the man, he was making timely saves, sliding across, making big saves that you can look back and say, wow, that could have / should have been a goal. Maybe I'm wrong. My memory's not working right now, but I don't really remember any of those in this Habs series. It's too good, man.
He's just, this entire team is just incredible. And you know what, even Lepore, the thing you brought about looking back at this team when we go 5-10 years down the road, this team could have 4 to 5 Hall of Famers on it. Victor Hedman is essentially a lock for the Hall of Fame. Same with Vasilevsky at this point. Kucherov, Braden Point, Steven Stamkos.
Is Stamkos? That's a debate. Is Stamkos a Hall of Famer?
That could be, but if you look at like his body of work, just,
I like the
sheer
discussion.
amount of goals and points he's going to rack up. Now he's got 2 cups. Like, there's going to be 4 to 5 Hall of Famers on this Lightning team.
Yeah.
And
sure.
it's just, I mean, there's just, you run out of things to say. It gets to the point where you run out of things to say because this team is just that good. And we're going to look back at this team and be like, well, of course they won the Stanley Cup with all this talent.
Like, why did we not bet everything on the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Stanley Cup?
Yeah,
it's funny.
We legit should have bet the house on this team winning the Cup.
But hockey, man, like here we were, a week and a half ago, talking about how they were going into a Game 7 against the Islanders and how the world was going to be flipped on its head and the Islanders were going to play Montreal in the Stanley Cup Final. But just again, like, more points about this team's dominance. Like, this is a Stanley Cup final, a final. This series went 7 games. Tampa had a higher expected goals in each and every single game of this series. Game 1, 65-35. Game 2, ironically enough, that was the game Montreal put up 40 whatever shots it was. Even that game, Tampa's expected goals was 52%. Game 3 was 69-31. Game 4 was 60-40. That was somehow the game Montreal won. And last night it was 57-43, which seems, actually, I'm surprised at that one. I would have thought it would have been even higher based on the way Tampa started the game. But a Stanley Cup final to sweep it with regard to expected goals. Like, we were the deserving team every game.
Yeah,
incredible,
so
man.
They had a higher expected goals in all 5 games of the series.
Yeah, like I said, the closest one was Game 2. If you remove Game 2, because that was the game Montreal had a shit ton of shots and somehow lost. Their expected goals in the games were 65, 69, 60, and 57.
Wow.
And again, then you throw in that expected goals. That number is based on average NHL talent and average NHL goaltending. And they're the Tampa Bay Lightning. So if they're putting up like a 55, 60% expected goals on you, they probably have like a 75, 80% chance to actually win the game because they're just too much. There's too much firepower there and they have goaltending. So good luck. Good luck, everyone.
For real. Good luck. But now we have to get into this conversation, Lepore. And, John Cooper on the ice after the Lightning won the Cup was talking about this. And I believe Steven Stamkos even alluded to this. This Lightning team knew damn well that this same team was not going to be back next season because,
How come?
As we all know, the Tampa Bay Lightning stashed Nikita Kucherov on long-term injured reserve this year. He missed the entire season, the entire 56-game regular season, rehabbing from hip surgery. So they were able to stash his contract. They were in the playoffs competing at $18 million over the salary cap. So, Lepore, I ask you this. Should there be an asterisk next to this championship for the Tampa Bay Lightning because they were this much over the salary cap?
Okay. I'm going to say, wait for it. Everyone's getting nervous to attack or getting ready to attack. I'm going to say no. There should not be an asterisk. And I'll tell you why. Everyone's pointing to them being 18 million over the cap. Everyone's pointing to the LTIR stuff. People are forgetting too. Remember they picked up Gabrick. So that gave them more space. So there's a lot going on here with regard to how Tampa got to the position they were in. The reason why I'm not going to point to them and call them cheaters and forever look at this Stanley Cup championship with an asterisk in mind is because of the way it happened. See, people are pointing to the rule, and I think this is fair to do. I think it's fair to point to the rule and say it has to be changed because what a team could do. It can get fishy in the way that a team could fake injuries so they can add at the deadline and then add those guys back at the right time. If that would have been the case, I would have said, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, put the asterisks on there. But with this Tampa team, so many things aligned perfectly that I don't really blame them for it. Because if you look at it, it's not a matter of, oh my God, they just added a whole bunch of shit at the deadline because they had guys on LTIR. They just didn't get rid of anyone from the previous year because of those injuries, and they could now afford, they could afford it. So here they are as a team. Okay, we have these injuries to our club. some big money guys. We're going into the season, and it's a shortened season and a weird COVID season as well. And we're going in, we might as well stay the course for now. And then people are pointing to the fact that Kucherov was apparently skating like way back and could have played way back. And yeah, you're totally allowed to point to that and say, you know what, he totally could have came back earlier. But really, again, from Tampa Bay's perspective, why would they do that? If they don't have to and they're not forced to, and if the player is willing to just wait a few more weeks, why not? Or a few more months, but why not? And I think really and truly, the stars align not so much on the Tampa Bay end, but also just in the way of the season. Like, we had a shortened year, we had a COVID year, we had like a weird season where teams were only playing each other in a division. Because I think when people point to this and say, "Oh, look what a team could just do this, and this to do it," you're forgetting that the player would have to be willing to do that. Like, I'll use the Leafs example. People would say, well, Austin Matthews can fake it. Well, you think Austin Matthews is going to take half a season?
Why the hell would a player want to, do something like that and sit out an entire regular season? And
not to mention like a really good player. Like, oh, I'm in the Art Ross race. I'm just going to like chill and then there's agents involved, the PAs involved. So in this case, I just think it worked out perfectly. And again, people are allowed to shit at it. Like, they're allowed to be upset, point to it. It's unfortunate. I think I'm totally okay with that. But I just think it was a certain year where it happened. Kucherov did get a surgery, everyone. He did, in fact.
Off-season hip surgery. Yeah, this wasn't a broken bone or a separated shoulder. Off-season hip surgery. Yeah. This was a serious injury.
What I would like to know, though, is, because the NHL is such a weird league, what is the protocol for a player to actually hit LTIR? Like, it seems like it's like pretty easy to do, but there's got to be some sort of like process with regard to the PA or the player, or like some sort of medical certification has to be stamped on it that yes, like it hit whatever level of whatever injury this player can be on LTIR. So I would think that has to come into play as well. So I don't know though. It'll be interesting to see how the league approaches it, because what's going to happen is, okay, so what's going to happen next year? What are teams going to do? Our team's going to try to pull the same shit in different ways. But then on the league's end, like, I think the league will do something eventually and how they restructure the cap and this thing specifically. But they don't want to do it too quickly, because, like, let's say they say this summer you can't do that. Well, now you're pointing the finger, and that's a bad look. So they'll give it a few years. They'll see how other teams approach it. But long and short of it, no, like, I don't give them an asterisk because, well, I'll say it this way. I wouldn't have done anything differently. I wouldn't have anything both on the side of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And even if I'm Kucherov, again, like, I had a major hip surgery. It's a weird COVID year. Yeah, I'll take the extra whatever time off and just come back fresh for the playoffs, because really and truly, more than even any other year, that's what matters. So, and I don't care about my points or whatever, because again, I missed most of the year and no one's going to care about this season anyway, really, when they look back at my career. So I'm okay with it, man. I'm okay with it. Are you?
I'm 100% okay with it. I don't think there should be an asterisk at all. And even looking at Kucherov, Lepore, he's under contract for the next 6 years at $9.5 million. So it's not like this guy was not like he was in a contract year and needed to come and play and prove himself. It's like you said, I think it was just a perfect storm of events that ended up working out in their favor, because, they win the Stanley Cup last season in the bubble after the season was extended by 5 months because of COVID. So you had an extremely quick turnaround, and not an extremely. So the season ended last year, early September.
And they went all the way. They did go all the way though, Bruno.
Yeah. So the season ends in September. So, I mean, it was a quick turnaround. You go to training camp in December and the season is starting second week of January. So this guy has off-season hip surgery. And, you're the Tampa Bay Lightning. You're like, okay, well, why are we going to rush this guy back? We just won the Stanley Cup. We have a ton of depth. I mean, we just talked for 20 minutes about how deep and talented this Lightning team is. So why wouldn't they do what they did? And, I'm sure going through the first, let's say 20, 30 games of this 56 game season, the Lightning were probably thinking, wow, we're pretty damn good. even without Nikita Kucherov and even with Steven Stamkos missing all this time.
That's the point too. I think people are forgetting. You have to be good enough to make the playoffs without those guys.
Yeah,
well.
like the Buffalo Sabres aren't going to stash Jack Eichel on LTIR and make the playoffs.
Well, I'll say even us. Do we have the balls to put like Matthews and or Marner on LTIR?
That's dicey.
I'd be like, no, like
we're making the playoffs in that situation.
Yeah, we're taking too much of a risk. So one thing people can say is that you can do it right. And again, this is why I'd like to know what the process of it a week before the trade deadline. You could fake that injury, add the guy at the deadline, and then that player doesn't come back. But again, like I don't think it's that simple to just, oh, so-and-so is injured, we're going to add Connor McDavid. And that, you know what I mean? Like, I think people sometimes don't give these big bodies enough credit. And by bodies, I mean like the National Hockey League or the Players Association.
Yeah, because I would imagine like there's medical things involved, right? Like you'd have to prove like with your medical team, and who knows, maybe there's ways around this, but like that so-and-so has, this injury or that injury, right? You can't just be like, well, this guy separated his shoulder, even though he
sprained his pinky. He can't play.
Yeah. And it's like,
wasn't there
evidence?
Like, to make it about the Leafs, that whole thing with Lupul, wasn't there some sort of investigation where the league brought in like an independent medical staff?
Yeah, you had the Lupul thing, and then Robida Island.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Lupul had so many injuries. The guy was injured every intermission. The guy came out with an injury. So, I mean, sure, that one wasn't that difficult.
Yeah, that guy was a walking Band-Aid. But yeah, like going back to my point here is like everything just worked out for this team, and they were playing so well without Nikita Kucherov. There was no reason to rush the guy back. And you know what? If you're in that situation and your team's that good and you have the ability to take advantage of a loophole like that, and it's under the rules, then by all means, go ahead. Don't blame the Tampa Bay Lightning for doing that. Yeah. And again, like Lepore said, like you have to be good enough to still make the playoffs without a player like that. So let's not be up in arms here. Like this team, like I said, had the 8th best record in the National Hockey League this season without Nikita Kucherov. So it's absurd. So yeah, I don't think there should be an asterisk. And it was impressive, honestly, Lepore, like how he just came back and was flying
crazy
from the first game.
Didn't he score?
I think he had 3 points.
Yeah, I think it was like 2 goals. I didn't want to get ahead of myself. I think I remember like 2 goals, like him celebrating.
Against the Florida Panthers. And I don't think people understand like how insane that is. Like you don't just come back from a surgery like that, and from the second you step on the ice, you basically return to MVP Nikita Kucherov. Like that dude is one of the top. I think he's one of the top 5 players in the world.
Sure.
I mean, you could argue in terms of like all around players, like maybe he's a top 5 offensive player, but in terms of being a two-way player, maybe you disagree with me. But
I thought we've agreed on this show, Bruno. Scoring's all that matters, right? Who cares about your own end?
In my book, at least, he's a top 5 player in the world. I mean, the guy led the playoffs in scoring by 9 points. Could have easily won the Conn Smythe over Andrei Vasilevsky. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question again, no, I don't think the Lightning cheated here. I don't think there should be an asterisk. I think this was a phenomenal team that dominated from game 1 of the playoffs and was fully deserving of becoming back-to-back Stanley Cup champions.
It kind of dawned on me last night watching the celebrations. So when I was a kid, there was like the whole Russian explosion of players. And I mean, they were great, and they pumped out cups with the Red Wings. And then you always get that, these great Russian stars come in the league, obviously like Ovechkin and Fedorov, Bure. It was amazing. And then it kind of tailed off. And then there was all like the debates about like, the Russian program, where does it lie? What kind of players are they producing? And then it got to the point where even like some teams don't even have scouts in Russia, and they won't draft Russian players. Part of it's because they're afraid they're just going to stay in the KHL, and it's a waste of a draft pick, but that's a whole other thing. But I was thinking last night, man, I'm like, you have Kucherov, Vasilevsky, and Sergachev. Like, you have 3 Russian studs on this Tampa Bay team. And I'd like to, like, going around the league, how many other teams have that? And it's not that like I'm not saying they did it on purpose or whatever. I'm just saying I think it's kind of cool that like they have those 3 Russian studs on that team, and they're great players, and it's a topic to talk about, right? It seems like it's been such a thing over the last little while of like teams kind of avoiding Russia, but hell, it's working for Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the top Russian scorers right now from the regular season. I guess the only other team you could say, Washington and New York. New York has Panarin and Pavel Buchnevich.
Bushnevich, yeah, okay.
And then Washington, obviously, with Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, who
Yeah.
just won the cup a couple of, or 3 years ago now. How
I'm
long has it been they
I'm
won
trying
the
to
cup?
think
3-4
who's
years?
that Washington? Yeah. I'm trying to think though, like Russia right now. What would be like their, because you mentioned Sergachev, like what would Russia's like top 6 D be? Because remember, like
Top
the World
6
Cup of
D,
hockey,
okay.
like the World Cup of hockey, they had Zaitsev. Remember that was like Leafs fans all excited, like we got this guy for free, and he was on he was on Team Russia at the World Cup. So
yeah, so you want to hear this, Lepore? I'm just looking at the leading scorers among D-men. So obviously
Sure.
there's other ways to evaluate D-men, but Sergachev led all Russian D-men this year with 30 points in 56 games. Provorov was
he's
next.
their third defenseman, and he had
Yeah.
30 points.
30 points in 56 games, just a beast, can skate like the wind, super powerful, like awesome strength. Like Sergachev's a beast.
Kind of like how we think about Stamkos, like every night being in bed, like dreaming about playing the Toronto Maple Leafs and regretting that he didn't sign with them. You think Sergachev feels the same way about that Montreal deal, or he's just like, wow, man, like,
Oh, Sergachev is loving life.
oh my
loving life right
They
now.
love Florida. They say the Russians love Florida. Like I think it was this year, the All-Star game was supposed to be in Florida, and people are like, watch out for the Russians, because like the Russians just love Florida.
That's awesome.
They'll be on the beach, every bar, everywhere. Like if you ever want to like pick an All-Star game to travel to, they're like, go to that one, because the Russians are gonna take over Florida.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, looking at some other D-men here. So Dmitry Orlov
Okay, fair
finished
enough.
third among Russian D-men in scoring, excuse me. And then fourth is our boy Nikita Zaitsev. Nikita Zaitsev and Artem Zub. So two Senators
There you
finished
go.
among the top 5 scorers among Russian-born defensemen this year in the NHL.
From Russia with love. There you go.
But yeah, I mean, Lepore, there's really nothing else to say about this Lightning team. Like, you can be pissed off all you want, and I know there's a lot of haters out there that, you know, are saying, screw this, they were 18 million over the cap, blah blah blah. You know what? Cry me a river. This team was built just phenomenally by Julien Brisebois and the other, you know, everyone else involved in that management team. Braden Point, 3rd round pick. Nikita Kucherov, 2nd round pick. Alex Killorn, I believe Alex Killorn was a late round pick as well. Yanni Gourde. Like, just go down the list. This team has done a phenomenal job drafting and developing players.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about like being up at night and with regret. Steve Yzerman.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, he has to be given credit, though.
Oh my God, 100%. And
that was the foundation, right, of this team.
And he just left. I mean, that was him, right? He just was like personal reasons at the time, they said, and it was weird because they were so good. But yeah, that one might be true.
Yeah. But yeah, this Lightning team is next level. But Lepore, now it is time to shift our attention to the Stanley Cup runner-up, Montreal Canadiens, who had an awesome playoff run. They really did. They
props to the Habs. Props to the Habs on the Gluttons For Punishment.
You know what? Props to the Montreal.
Props to the Montreal Canadiens.
It was a great playoff run. No one expected them to make it that far. No one expected them to beat the Leafs. A lot of people didn't think they'd beat the Jets, and no one in their right mind thought they were going to beat the Vegas Golden Knights. Yeah. But the clock struck midnight on the Habs because, like we said, I mean, this Stanley Cup Final just simply wasn't close, and it could have easily been a sweep. It was just they were dominated, and when you look at the Montreal Canadiens, I mean, they just did not show up across the board. When it comes to offense, they scored 8 goals in 5 games. Their defense core did not look nearly as effective as it did in the previous 3 rounds. And then, of course, Lepore, the main person we need to look at here is Carey Price.
Yeah.
So Carey Price was getting all the love in the world through the first 3 rounds in the playoffs, and rightfully so.
Yeah,
just look at his numbers. Against the Leafs, a .932 save percentage. In the second round against Winnipeg, a .942 save percentage. And then in the third round against Vegas, a .933 save percentage. A lot of people thought that He was the front runner to win the Conn Smythe, even if the Habs had lost the Stanley Cup Final like they did. A lot of people were saying that.
This series goes 6. I think Price gets it.
Yeah.
If he played well, if he would have put up a similar save percentage and they get the series goes 6, I think he gets it.
Exactly. But Carey Price put up an .888 save percentage in 5 games in this Stanley Cup Final. So, Michael Lepore, is Carey Price the main person to blame for the Habs' loss in the Cup Final?
I think that Carey Price, if we're going to circle one person, is to blame for Montreal losing in this Stanley Cup Final. And the reason for that is because of what he means to that team. He is a guy who makes a lot of money, regardless of his position, and he has to show up. He's got to be the man. He can't just be good. He can't just be average, and he cannot be below average or bad. And I'm sure people are getting upset at these comments as I'm saying them. But if you look at the underlying numbers, his goals expected, save percentages, all those numbers, he was below average NHL goaltending in all of them. He was getting beat. Was it game 3 that he looked really bad? Was that the one?
Yeah, it was game 3.
Yeah. So like he didn't have a good series. Now we're not addressing that question focusing on the totality of the playoffs, because obviously Carey Price was the best player for the Montreal Canadiens in these playoffs, and rightfully so, because he is their best player and he is their highest paid player. So that is what it is. And we were the ones sitting here throwing trash at Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner when the Leafs lost to Montreal, saying you're paid what you're paid. You have to score. So if Carey Price is paid what he's paid and labeled as the face of the franchise, he's got to be excellent. And on the biggest stage, he wasn't excellent, he wasn't good, and he wasn't even average. He was below average. And if you're going to circle one thing, I would say, yeah, one single player, I should say. I mean, this team couldn't score. Like, you're not going to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning scoring 8 goals in 5 games. Like, please, like, give me a break. And that's a whole other topic with regard to Montreal's talent. But I think addressing that question or seeing that aspect of it, we're looking at the totality of something, like their forward group. But if we look at that roster and evaluate player by player, what that player would have needed to do based on that team winning and where a fair expectation can be laid, he was well below. And it wasn't good enough. I mean, even if he played well, would they have won anyway? Probably not. But if I'm going to focus on one player, I should say, it's Carey Price, man. He had to, I'll put it this way. For Montreal to have a chance, he had to be way better. And based on his name, based on the money he makes, based on the way he played in the 3 previous rounds, it's not an unfair assessment. Beyond all this, like, I love Carey Price. He is like slowly creeping into like one of my favorite players ever. When Josh Anderson scored the winning goal in game 3, they showed the video of Price, like the camera being on Price. And you can see how, like, you can't see the other end. You can only see Price. So it's like he kind of creeps down like this. So you're assuming, okay, this is where Anderson's like approaching the net thinking, okay, get a goal here. And then he just kind of delays. And then you hear the horn, the fans are going bananas, and Price just turns around, grabs his water bottle, and skates to the bench. No celebration. Off we go. Let's get on a plane. Let's get back to Tampa and keep this going. Like, I loved that. No jumping up and down. He knew exactly where his team stood. He knew not to get too excited. Just, okay, I'm dialed in, all business. And I absolutely love Carey Price for that. But again, going through that lineup, if we went player by player on where certain guys had to be to have a chance in this series against Tampa Bay, he would probably be the lowest one, because like I said, he had to be at his best for this team to not even win, to have a chance. And he absolutely was not. I'll fire it over to you now, Bruno. Is Carey Price to blame for Montreal not winning the Stanley Cup?
Lepore, I agree with you. And again, it's nothing against Carey Price. I don't want to sit here and shit on Carey Price, but it was no secret heading into this series, we all knew, okay? Everybody knew that Carey Price had to be the best player for the Montreal Canadiens because he was the best player for the Montreal Canadiens in their previous 3 series victories.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, right? And just the way that this team is built. Okay, I know they found a way to generate offense in that Jets series, and I know they found a way to make things happen in that Vegas series. But in this Lightning series, you just knew that the way the Lightning played defensively, and I talked about this heading into the Stanley Cup Final, the Tampa Bay Lightning had better defensive numbers than the Montreal Canadiens because we all thought, oh, this Habs team, they're a shutdown defensive team with Carey Price. And then you look over at the Lightning, Andrei Vasilevsky had a better save percentage and goals saved above expected than Carey Price. They had a better just goals against per game than the Montreal Canadiens. The only thing that the Habs, I guess, had over the Lightning in terms of like defensive play was their historically dominant penalty kill.
Right.
Which I got to check the final numbers on this, but the Montreal Canadiens penalty kill, I believe, ended up finishing over 90% in the playoffs. And it's going to go down as one of the best single postseason penalty kills of all time. Like it was that good. But, you know, when you look at this Lightning team, you knew that they were going to do a good job on these Montreal forwards and find a way to neutralize them and slow them down. And that meant that Carey Price was going to have to stand on his head. And he just simply did not do that. An .888 save percentage is not good enough. And I know he played well in game 4. And you know what? For the most part, he played pretty well in game 5. But those first 3 games to go into an 0-3 series hole, and Lepore, you mentioned that game 3. And you're right. It was the game where Jan Ruda scored that seeing eye shot from the point less than 2 minutes into the game. And then Victor Hedman scored that power play goal from the point that squeaked through Carey Price. Like goals that you just don't expect to get past Carey Price in a situation like that. So yeah.
So like I mentioned the cumulative goals saved above expected. Like that game 3, according to that metric, he was like terrible, like a terrible NHL goalie.
Yeah, and there you go, right? So he was the reason, honestly, that team was in a 3-0 hole. And maybe it's not fair. Maybe you say, you know, you got to blame the forwards or you got to blame the defense core for not being as effective in front of Carey Price. But at the end of the day, he's their $10.5 million player, and Habs fans have been talking for the last month about how great he is and how he's the best goalie in the world and how he's carried them this far. Well, you know, then we got to call a spade a spade. Carey Price was just not good enough, specifically in the first 3 games of the Stanley Cup Final. So yeah, I think he is the main person to blame on this Habs team. But Lepore, we can even go further down the list here. Like offensively, like you said, you're scoring 8 goals in 5 games. You think you're going to beat a team like what? Never mind the Lightning. You're not going to beat any team scoring 8 goals in 5 games. And I talked about this on the previous show. These are issues that reared its ugly head for the Montreal Canadiens because you go back to the regular season, the final 22 games of the season, the Montreal Canadiens only won 8 games and they had a minus 27 goal differential. Like this team was a disaster to end the season just in terms of generating offense, scoring goals. And they found a way, it seemed, to figure it. You know, they figured it out over those first 3 rounds to get by. But in that cup final, their inability to generate offense and their lack of talent, specifically at the forward position, was blatantly obvious in this series against the Lightning. And I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. When you have Carey Price off his game, when you have the offense unable to generate scoring chances, and then when you have the 4-headed monster on defense, as Habs fans like to call it, with Petrie, Weber, Sherrod, and Joel Edmondson, when those guys aren't playing like we saw them play earlier in the playoffs, there's just no chance you're going to beat this Lightning team. It's as simple as that.
Even with like back to Carey Price, so he was .888, and last night, he saved like 29 of 30 or something. So it's like he was even worse like after the first 4 games. But this is not confirmation bias. Montreal was never going to beat Tampa Bay. Like actually looking at these lineups, like anyone who thought Montreal had a chance and this isn't even an insult to Montreal. It's the Tampa. Like I would say this about most teams in the National Hockey League. You have no chance to beat this team. Just looking at the lineups. Like what I like to do is, okay, two teams are playing each other. If you molded their lineups together, where would you slot? Like, what would the teams combine to? Like, if one team had access to all of Montreal's players and all of Tampa's players, what would the lineup look like? Where would you put like who on Montreal? Like, I'm not saying makes the team, but like you're getting low. Like obviously the forward group, like you're getting low in the
like
forward
for
group.
example, like Lepore, like Nick Suzuki, if he was on the Tampa Bay Lightning, like where would he rank in terms of like their best forwards?
I'll put it this way: when Montreal pulled the goalie, so facing elimination in the Stanley Cup Final, Montreal pulled the goalie last night, and I noticed who they had on the ice. They had Suzuki, Perry, Toffoli. I assume they had Anderson, and I forget who else. Like think of those guys on Tampa Bay. And again, that's not an insult to Montreal. It's a compliment to Tampa Bay. Where are they? And then you think reverse it. The Lightning facing elimination in a series. They have Kucherov, Point, Stamkos. Like it's hilarious. Like you have an all-star team out there. Like a casual hockey fan would be able to name every guy. So it's just it was a total mismatch. It was a total talent mismatch. The score shows it. The underlying numbers show it. The fact that it was done in 5 games shows it. I mean, it's the reality of it, and it's back to Tampa just being too good. And I'd love to see, like again, being the fly on the wall. See if you're like Ducharme, and you're prepping for this series. Like, how are you approaching it? Really and truly, like other than saying like we really hope Carey plays out of his mind and we can catch them on a counter, get some power play goals, and hopefully our penalty kill stays the course. That's it. Because again, if you're being completely objective, no. Like I'll say it. Like I bet on the Lightning in the semifinals to go on and win the Stanley Cup because I figured, you know what, I'm pretty sure they're going to beat the Islanders. It was close, but I was pretty confident they would beat the Islanders, and I thought they would be a pretty heavy favorite going into the final, facing either Montreal or Vegas. So then the line was plus 180. So I'm like, yeah, I'm getting positive money. Like, I'll take that bet. Looking back, and again, hindsight betting, but should have bet more. like again, really, for like this Tampa team, how good they are in their lineup compared to the other lineups, it would have taken something really and truly magical for Montreal to beat this team. Magical. Like even then, like I'd like to break down the numbers to see at what point, like the shots against Price, at what point would like, or where would his save percentage to have been for this to be a close series? And that's even getting to close, like a close.
He would have needed like a 930, really, like he had
again, like
series.
Again. So if you have to say that, it's not a realistic expectation for anyone to have. If I'm going to be completely honest.
Yeah, like when you go into a Stanley Cup final, usually it's a coin flip, right? You have the best team in the East taking on the best team in the West. And even last year with Dallas, like we all knew that Dallas wasn't as talented as Tampa, but Dallas put up a pretty good fight in that Stanley Cup final, losing in 6 games.
They had a lot of injuries too. I remember.
They had a lot of injuries. We talked about this before with the Sagan injury, how he was like their 8th leading scorer during the playoff run last year. Like that's a Dallas team that has like that very low key has like a lot of depth. But anyway, like you view a Stanley Cup final as a coin flip. This series heading into it, I don't think anyone viewed this as a coin flip. And I even look at some of the numbers I saw on Twitter. Like Dom Lucian always releases, you know, his metrics and his probabilities before the series. I think he had the Lightning at like 85%.
Are you serious? That high?
I think it was like 85-15 heading into the Cup final. It was in the 80s from what I remember. I'd have to go back and check it out.
A final.
Yeah, like think about how insane that is.
How insane that is.
A Stanley Cup final, and he had a team, and it wasn't just him. You go look at some of the other, you know, stats guys on Twitter or, you know, across social media. A lot of them thought that, you know, the Lightning were a heavy favorite, and even Vegas thought the Lightning were a heavy favorite in this series. So,
oh yeah, the betting you made no, like game by game, it was like a useless bet to bet on Tampa in any of these games.
Yeah, so it was just a very lopsided series. And Lepore, now we got to talk about the Montreal Canadiens moving forward.
Yeah.
But before we talk about them moving forward, let's have a quick conversation about this season and this playoff run specifically. And how do you think the 2021 Montreal Canadiens are going to be remembered? Because it was a very weird season, Lepore. Like, and I talked about this on our last podcast. I'm just going to bring up these numbers real quick. So you look at the win-loss record in the regular season and playoffs combined this year and goal differential. Okay, so the Lightning 52-27 this year. So they won 52 out of 79 games and had a plus 64 goal differential, while the Montreal Canadiens were 37-41. So they won just 37 of 78 games this year and had a minus 12 goal differential. So just taking all that into consideration, Lepore, how should we look back at this season for the Habs and this playoff run where they actually got to the Stanley Cup Final?
Ooh, this is a good one, Bruno. I'm gonna kind of people are gonna be mad at me for this one because I'm gonna kind of take a curve on this one. I think we're gonna look back at this season for the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, we're gonna look at it fondly because they made a Stanley Cup Final. They went through a Canadian division, so they got to spit at other Canadian teams along the way. They'll get to laugh at Leafs fans for a long time, or until they face each other again in the playoffs, or until Toronto can beat them in a playoff series. So who knows about that one. But I think, and I feel like I'm copping out here, but I think this run for Montreal will be remembered based on how next year goes for them. Because if this team has a strong year next year, if these kids continue to develop and say Montreal comfortably makes the playoffs next year, people will look back and say, yeah, like we saw like the start of this last year in the playoffs. This team was a good team towards the end of the year, meaning the playoffs, and it continued into this regular season, and we'll see what happens in next year's playoffs. But, and this may be unfair, but if this team gets off to a bad start, or if this team misses the playoffs next year, it will affect how people look back on it, because it's hockey. To go far, whether you're a good team or I'm not going to say a bad team, I don't think any bad teams make the playoffs, but a lot has to go your way. And people call it luck. It's not luck. Like, luck is sort of like a negative word. It's just like the sport. You can get outplayed, you can still win. You can get dominated, you can still win. So things happened in Montreal's favor for them to go on this run that were unlikely. Like, I'll put it that way. A lot of things happened in their control and outside their control that helped them go on this run. So it's easy for people to point to it and say they fully deserve credit. And it's easy for people to point to it and say they don't deserve any credit at all. This is just a complete fluke. But I think on the grand scope of things, we will get a full assessment of this, or I shouldn't say a full assessment of it. Sort of like the mainstream take of it will be developed next year based on how they do in the regular season, if they make the playoffs, and how they do in the playoffs. I mean, it's kind of like the similar one I have in my head is Ottawa in 2017, how that team was one goal away from the Stanley Cup Final. And then it's funny because everyone pointed, like the advanced stats guys were pointing to that team and calling it bullshit, saying this team has no business beating this team. They're getting all the breaks, all the bounces, all the luck. And Sens fans were quick to say, like, what are you talking about? This team's great. Well, they plummeted in the standings the next year. Like, I remember like the Hockey News had them in the preseason rankings missing the playoffs. It's like, how do you put a team that's one goal away from the Stanley Cup Final missing the playoffs? Well, everything went their way. And before you know it, Pierre Dorion was on the stage saying, we're going to rebuild this team and gut it. So it's similar to that. But again, that assessment was made of the Sens the following season. So people kind of look back at that now like, how'd that happen? Or at least some people do. So I think that's kind of what's going to happen in Montreal. So it's up to the organization, I guess, on it's going to be result based on how they look at it. So,
yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, Lepore. And the way that I assess the situation, you had quite frankly, just a not very good team.
Yeah, you're a lot more harsh than I am, I think,
Like,
on the
let's not
topic of the Montreal
sugarcoat it.
Canadiens.
This team finished 4 games under 500 this year, just looking at straight win-loss record, a minus 12 goal differential. You're lying to yourself if you think this Montreal Canadiens team was really good. And listen, full credit to them for making it to the Stanley Cup Final. We've seen this before. We've talked about this countless times on the last 2 or 3 shows. You have the 03 Anaheim Ducks, the 04 Flames, the 06 Oilers. Then you had the Kings in 2012 who won the cup as an 8 seed. But as me and Lepore have talked about, that count. Kings team was not a real 8 seed. That was a very, very good Kings team. But, this Habs team, they got hot at the perfect time. Carey Price went from a .901 save percentage in the regular season to, stopping the puck at over a 93% rate in the playoffs up until the Stanley Cup Final, of course. You had the emergence of Cole Caulfield, which was awesome to see because I think
that was exciting for Montreal. Again, round of applause for the kids. Like, that really was exciting as a neutral.
Like Caulfield and Suzuki, man, those guys.
Suzuki's a player, man.
They were so impressive. And it's not even just like, the highlight reel goals that you're seeing, both of these guys score. To me, it's their ability to generate offense. And I talk about this so many times. Like, you need guys that can make plays. And especially when it gets tight and you're in, a 1-goal game in the playoffs and you need somebody to make something happen when there's not a lot of room out there. And Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, those were the guys that were doing that for the Montreal Canadiens. And listen, I know Josh Anderson had a couple real nice games, the 2-goal game in Game 4 of the Cup Final, and he had that 2-goal game in the Vegas series, but he was a ghost most of the playoffs.
It's kind of his thing, eh? It's like he had some games, like the best player out there. Oh my God, this guy's incredible. And then it's like, did Josh Anderson play? Looking at other games, dude, it's weird.
It's really weird because you watch him sometimes and you're like, oh my God, this guy's like 6'2", 6'3", skates like the wind, like amazing power forward, and then just disappears for like 6 games. Yeah. Whereas like Nick Suzuki, game in and game out, I thought he was great. And Cole Caulfield wasn't as good in the Cup Final. Like, he was awesome in the Vegas series. In the Cup Final, he wasn't very good. But I mean, can we give this guy a break? I mean, he's a rookie. He has now I don't even know how many games of NHL experience does he have now? Like, he hasn't even hit like 30 games of NHL experience. Yeah. Something in that range. But anyway, so those are positive things to look at moving forward. But, then you look at this D core. It's an aging defense core. I like Jeff Petrie. I still like Shea Weber, but Ben Sherrod and Joel Edmondson. I mean, come on here. I mean, this team just, they need to upgrade at pretty much every position. Like,
Romanov's good. I think Romanov could be good.
Yeah, and Romanov's a good player too, but like, it was also weird how like they just didn't play Romanov.
Yeah, like, what's Montreal's problem, man? With these kids, even Kotkaniemi near the end too. Like what's just going bizarre. On?
And even going back, Lepore, even going back to the first round series against the Leafs, how Caulfield was a healthy scratch in the first 2 games.
Wasn't it Kotkaniemi and Caulfield?
Yeah,
that was
Kotkaniemi was a healthy scratch in game 1. And then I think he returned for game 2, but they waited like an extra game to play Caulfield. Yeah. It's like, what the hell are they doing?
Yeah.
Like, those guys, like those young guys were their best players. And maybe not Romanov, but even Romanov, like, you watch him, but he scored a goal in the Cup Final. Sure. He's smooth. He can be physical. Like, and I get it. They don't have the experience. Let's play the experienced guys, the guys that I trust. But it's like,
in that voice,
it got to a point where they're just like galaxy braining it. Even with Thomas Tatar, he's been like one of their leading scorers the last couple of seasons. And I know he was dealing with an injury at some point, but then they just decided to just not play him. Like, at all. Like, I don't know. There were some weird decisions that were being made with that Montreal management team and coaching staff. But yeah, I mean, I look at this Habs team and what they did this year, and you cannot look at this being another team in the National Hockey League and say, we're going to replicate that. Like, I think that's when you're going to get into trouble here is looking at this Habs team and being like, oh, we can do that next year. Well, yeah, you can do that next year if 12 different things go your way, but you just can't have this many holes throughout your lineup, have that much of a talent discrepancy from series to series, and expect to actually win a Stanley Cup. And again, they made the Cup final. The Leafs haven't won a playoff series since 2004, okay? This team made it to the friggin' Stanley Cup final, which is incredible.
To that point, Bruno, since this came out the other day, of course it came out the other day. Well, two things came out. I think the Leafs are now the longest ever drought. They passed the Rangers drought.
Yeah, by days, just
days. It was like whatever, 1,000 days. And now that Montreal has made a Stanley Cup final since the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won a playoff series, minus the new young Winnipeg Jets, every Canadian team has in fact made the Stanley Cup final.
That is so sad.
Gluttons for punishment.
Like, that literally makes me want to go cry.
Punch right in the balls right there to go on the show.
Oh my God, that's brutal. But yeah, like, going back to this Habs team, like I said, kudos to them. Full credit for getting this far. But that team was never talented enough to win the Stanley Cup. And I've talked about even, the New York Islanders. It's like, as well as they play defensively, and as well as they commit to their system, does that team have the talent to win a Stanley Cup? And now we've seen 2 years in a row where they've lost in the conference final. So yeah, this Habs team, they have some major work to do, I think, because you look at the Atlantic Division next season, and everyone's talking about this. You got Boston, Tampa, Florida, the Leafs. I mean, Ottawa, I still don't think is there.
Ottawa's going to be better.
But they're getting better, right? So, like, Lepore, do you think this, I mean, I don't want to just throw this on you out of nowhere, but if you had to pick right now, like, are the Habs, or do you think the Habs are going to make the playoffs next season?
It's hard for me to put them in the top 3 in the divisions. Then I'd say no. Like, if I'm betting, I would say no, because I wouldn't put them in the top 3 in the division, and then they're in the wild card race with the other division. And so who knows, like, what happens there? Like Florida, Tampa Bay, Boston, Toronto. Well, I'll put it that way. Would you put them ahead of those 4?
I wouldn't. Like,
so right there, you have one more playoff spot, because you have the 3, and then you have the one that drops to the wild card.
Yeah, like, I think the Habs next year, like, they'll probably be fighting for a wild card spot. I really think that's their upside.
That's fair.
Things could change. Like, if they go out and they acquire like Jack Eichel, or make some like massive splash like that, and actually bring in like a legit number 1 center, top line forward star in the league, that'll change my mind a little bit. But as currently constructed, we're heading into next season. And I know that some of these other teams in the Atlantic Division have moves to make, and their rosters are going to look a little bit different as well, especially the Tampa Bay Lightning. But yeah, it's just hard to look at this Habs team as a top 3 team in the Atlantic Division. I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them next year. And listen, it might even be an uphill battle for the Leafs as well. Like, I don't think the Leafs are a stone lock to finish like top 2 or 3 in the division. So it's going to be a hell of a division for every team involved. And I can't wait for it.
Yeah.
All right, Lepore, any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up about what we just saw in the Stanley Cup final, or even this season in general?
Yeah, man, I was going to say that's a wrap. That's a wrap on the first season of this podcast. As far as hockey goes, we'll have lots to talk about from week to week, but a hell of a year, man. They got through it. I think the NHL, don't say this too often about the league I hate the most, but the NHL did a pretty good job getting through the season. It was different divisions, something that we'll talk about and look back at forever. We had a Cinderella story. We had a team that will go down as, I think, one of the best Stanley Cup champions ever. And yeah, a lot of guesses into next season, what will happen, what won't happen. And before you know it, I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about with regard to the stuff that happens off the ice. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, very well said, Lepore. At one point it looked a little bit dicey in terms of where they're going to get the season in, how many games are they going to play this year. But I'm glad that everything worked out. We had a great 50-game sprint in the regular season of the playoffs. Some crazy things happened in the playoffs. It was very entertaining. Obviously, the Leafs completely let us down again this year. But, just in general, it was a very exciting year of hockey. And I can't wait. I can't wait for next season. This podcast isn't going anywhere. We are going to be here breaking down the off-season, free agency, the expansion draft, trades. So the GFP podcast is going to be there for all of that. And we hope that you, the listeners and viewers, are going to be along for the ride because we have had a hell of a time with these first 28 episodes, and we do not plan on stopping anytime soon. All right, everybody, that is going to do it for episode 28 of the Gluttons for Punishment podcast, or GFP, a Toronto Maple Leafs and NHL podcast hosted by Michael Lepore and Anthony Bruno. If you're a new listener and you enjoyed the show, it would be a big time help if you give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube and you enjoy the content, we would appreciate it more than you would ever know if you just smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you know exactly when the GFP podcast is posting some new content. So for Michael Lepore, I'm Anthony Bruno, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.